In March of 2010, a California Sheriff's Department dispatcher named Monique Patino was to receive one of the most shocking and disturbing calls of her entire career. The call came early on a Tuesday morning. Monique answered the call in the same manner she'd done 1,000 times before, only to hear the terrified, fear-saturated voice of none other than a 7-year-old boy on the other end of the line. "911, what is your emergency?" she asked calmly. As a mother, the response shook Monique to her core. There's some guy. He's going to kill my mom and dad. Can you come?" the little boy asked, his voice wavering into a terrified wail as the horrific realization hit him. "Can you come really fast? And bring some cops, a lot of them, and bring soldiers too." Monique was the mother of 2 young children herself, and despite the fact that the child's terrified cries screamed through her head like nails on a chalkboard, she remained calm and professional, immediately dispatching nearby units of police to the family's home. "Listen to me," she said to the young boy. "Take a breath. I already have the police coming. Where are you at in the house?" Inside the bathroom," the boy replied in between staggered, panicked breaths. 3 men, armed with small-caliber weapons, had managed to sneak into the family's house through an unlocked door in a home invasion intended to separate the family from their valuables. The family's 6-year-old daughter had ran out to their car to grab her school lunchbox so her mother could fill it before she drove them to school. But the assailants, in a green and gray 2-door compact car, had been casing the house, and when they realized that the little girl could well have neglected to lock the door behind them, they swooped in to take advantage. But the 7-year-old boy named Carlos had acted fast. He grabbed the family house phone, then his younger sister, and rushed into the upstairs bathroom, locking the door behind him before he called 911 to seek emergency assistance. But as young Carlos was in the process of saving his family from the horrendous, violent ordeal, one of the gunmen overheard him talking to the 911 operator and began to break down the door to the bathroom, slamming his boot into the thin wood over and over again. "Just hearing them scream and cry for help," she later said. "I just felt their fear through the phone." The sound of the 2 young children's screams as the evil, callous criminal began to smash his way into their apparently protected space is frankly the stuff of nightmares. However, when the home invader finally broke his way inside and saw the phone in the young boy's hand, he realized the situation, that little Carlos had the presence of mind to actually call the police instead of simply cowering in the family bathroom hoping to stay hidden. He panicked, calling out to his fellow criminals that the cops were probably only moments away from arriving on the scene. The trio then scarpered without taking a single valuable item from the family home or harming any of the family they had subjected to such a terrifying experience. However, unfortunately for the family and for law enforcement, the quick reactions of the home invaders meant that they were never found or arrested for the crime and are horrifyingly enough still on the loose today. When a news conference was held to commemorate the young man's brave actions, 7-year-old Carlos told a large congregation of reporters that he had managed to remain calm during the harrowing ordeal because his mother used to make him practice dialing 911 in case of emergencies. At the press event, Carlos, who proudly sported a Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department baseball cap, gave a huge hug to the 911 dispatcher who had handled his call. Monique Patino went on to call the boy her little hero, as she intermittently wiped away tears of joy from her cheeks. She told Carlos that he had been exceptionally brave for doing what he did, telling him she was very, very proud of him for having saved his entire family from what would undoubtedly been a prolonged and highly traumatic experience. "I'm still astounded by his mindset," Los Angeles County Sheriff Sergeant Douglas Jensen was later heard to have said. To be able to think about getting his sister, grabbing his phone, locking himself in a bathroom and calling 911, it shows so much. He did a fantastic job, better than most adults, he added, and the whole episode offers a valuable lesson to parents everywhere. Teaching your kid how to dial 911 in case of an emergency is something that is not only prudent, but might well save your life one day. As terrifying as it is to hear the 911 call of this incident, which is freely available on YouTube and on various California news websites, Hearing just how brave that young Carlos is to act in the way that he did is frankly inspirational. But we should also keep in mind that the toll these kinds of calls take on the mental health of the nation's 911 dispatchers cannot be underestimated. So please, take a moment to be grateful for all that they do to keep ourselves and our families safe. On October 26, 2014, a call came into a 911 dispatch center in the state of Florida. The call came from the 300 block of Southeast Walton Lakes Drive in the city of Fort Pierce. At first, the caller sounds practically timid and polite, informing the dispatcher that he is in need of the police, even calling her ma'am as he does so. The caller then calmly informs the dispatcher that a murder has been committed. He sounds resigned, not stating that he thinks that a murder has been committed, but that he knows it is a fact. By who, she asks, her tone still relatively calm. By me, ma'am, he replies. Who did you murder? The dispatcher then asks, starting to sound disturbed by what she's hearing. The response is haunting. I murdered my wife. The caller goes on to admit that he murdered his wife at around 7 o'clock that same morning, telling the dispatcher that his name is Checkingson Sinclair. Listening to the 911 call, it's horrifyingly clear how cold and collected Checkingson is, his tone rivaling even the most chilling portrayals of murderous psychopaths shown in Hollywood movies. He goes on to explain that his wife's body is still in the apartment they shared together, that he killed her with a gun, and that he shot her in the head in the couple's bedroom. Checkingson mentions that after he shot his wife in the head that morning, he calmly laid the pistol he murdered her with on the couple's dining table. All right, we got somebody coming out there to talk to you, the dispatcher then says, regaining some of her professionalism as she does so. But why did you do this? We got into an argument, Checkingson says plainly, and she came at me with a knife. I had to defend myself. She was going to attack me with a knife. When asked what his wife's name was, Checkingson replies that she was named Latoisa Argret. Latoisa was 24 and 7 weeks pregnant with her 21-year-old husband's child when he shot her in the head. The couple had been married for just shy of 8 months, but Checkingson was quick to inform the dispatcher that they argued and fought with alarming frequency. When asked how long the Fort Pierce Police Department will take to arrive at the apartment block, the dispatcher informs Checkingson that they will not be long at all, and pleads with him not to be near the gun when they arrive. He replies that he simply wants them to come over as quickly as possible so they can deal with the situation, and they will not be standing near the weapon when they arrive. Upon their entry into the couple's apartment, police officers found Latoisa's body exactly where her husband had said it was, on the floor of their bedroom, with a steak knife in her hand. At first it appeared to be tragic but typical case of domestic violence that had unfortunately and horribly ended in murder by self-defense. But upon questioning the couple's neighbors, law enforcement began to become deeply suspicious. One neighbor told officers that they had been woken up by a loud bang as early as 6 o'clock in the morning and had heard another one follow soon after. But they failed to act on what they had heard because they knew the couple fought frequently and had assumed it was one of the pair slamming an apartment door. Despite the fact that the gunshots seemed to have occurred around 6 that morning, Checkingson didn't end up calling 911 until 9, a whole 3 hours later. This only deepened the concerns of the investigating police that his story was not entirely factual. Forensics examiners then noticed that the blood splatters around the bedroom were not consistent with the story of self-defense that had been claimed by Checkingson. Not only that, but skull fragments were buried in the bedroom wall, well away from where the fatal shot had penetrated the floor of the apartment. That there was no doubt in their mind that Latoisa's body had been moved after she had been shot and killed. They also recognized that the murdered woman's fingerprints were indeed on the knife, but not clear enough to confirm that she had gripped the handle at all. It seemed likely that not only had Checkingson moved her body after he had killed her, but he had also placed the knife in her hand in an attempt to make it appear as if though she had attacked him. When confronted with this evidence by homicide detectives, he admitted the truth. He admitted that he had wanted to kill his wife after he confronted her over a text message she received from a former boyfriend. He went on to confess how he had serious doubts that the child that Latoisa was pregnant with was actually his, and that the couple argued so frequently because he was insecure and jealous, constantly suspecting his wife, as well as countless previous girlfriends, of being habitually unfaithful to him. Checkingson then officially changed his story regarding how the murder unfolded, telling police that he and his wife had gotten into a verbal altercation early on the Sunday morning about a text message she received from another man. Latoisa denied any infidelity, asserting that the 7-week-old baby inside of her did indeed belong to him, and that he had nothing to be jealous of. But this did not calm Checkingson down. He took her cell phone, walked into the couple's bathroom, and violently threw it into the toilet, smashing the screen and inflicting a heavy amount of water damage to the phone's motherboard. Latoisa then screamed at him, furious that he should essentially accuse her of lying to him. Checkingson, now apoplectic with rage that his wife was now raising her voice to him, retrieved his pistol from the bedside drawer, aiming it at her head, and pulled the trigger. Because he was shaking with anger, Checkingson's aim was poor. His first shot grazed his wife's skull, splitting off chunks of bone fragment that were later found by the forensic examiners. This first shot knocked her to the floor, stunning her. At this stage, she was absolutely no threat to anyone and presented absolutely no danger to her husband, horribly contradicting his initial story of self-defense. Then, as she lay face down on the bedroom floor of their small Fort Pierce apartment, Checkingson walked around the bed, fired another shot. He then proceeded to send a text message to a close friend, informing them that he wouldn't be able to participate in fantasy football that season, as well as texts to his mother and brother telling them that he loved them. This wasn't just a murder. This was an execution, Assistant State Attorney Brandon White had later said at the murder trial. There was a good chance that any sane or rational individual would have come to their senses after the first shot was fired. It was a shot to the head, one that fractured a woman's skull, but Checkingson Sinclair actually stopped to check if his wife was still alive, and discovering that she was, fired another shot square into the back of her head, straight-up execution style. Under Florida law, because Sinclair was convicted of first-degree murder in the death of his wife, the death of his unborn child also became a first-degree murder. Because Sinclair pled guilty, the state did not seek the death penalty and spared his life, and so he sits in a Florida penitentiary to this very day, to wander of the life he might have led with his wife and child, had he not opted to pull the trigger on that fateful October morning. In January of 2008, a 911 dispatch center in Detroit, Michigan received a terrifying call from a cell phone somewhere in the city. But when the operator answers, asking what the caller's emergency is, it initially seemed like there is no one on the other end. But this is not a classic accidental case of butt dialing 911, as the horrified dispatcher began to hear something hideously unnerving coming from the other end of the line. "Let us go," a female voice screams. "Hello? Is anyone there?" the dispatcher asked frantically, but still there was no direct reply. However, what she heard next made the hairs on the back of her neck stand on end. "So you're gonna kill us and put us in the trunk?" "I'm not gonna put you in the trunk," a voice is heard to say. It's a gruff male voice full of malice. "Then what about afterwards?" the female on the other end of the line is heard asking. "There is no afterwards," comes the ominous reply. The dispatcher then heard the man mention something about going to prison forever. Then some unspeakable things, along with another garbled piece of speech that seemed to reference some kind of murder weapon. The dispatcher acted fast. Since the call was coming from a cell phone, the dispatcher was able to make a note of the longitude and latitude that the call was being received from before passing the information along to their lieutenant. The coordinates showed it was coming from Pinewood Street near Hoyt in the city of Detroit. But suddenly, the phone call cuts out and the dispatcher feared the worst. Yet thankfully, just minutes later, another call came in from the same number, with the same girl crying in the background, only this time it came with a differing set of coordinates. This happened over and over again, a repeating cycle of calls and hang-ups, until police were able to fix the cell phone at a stationary location, immediately sending units out to patrol nearby streets. "I'm not trying to sneak out," the same girl screamed in the background of yet another call. "Don't punch me, please. I'm sorry. Just please don't hit me again." The dispatcher who received the call worked frantically to relay as many details as was possible to nearby units, listening intently for anything that could end up saving the girl's life. But all he can hear is a girl screaming, over and over again, as if suffering through an ungodly amount of pain. Then suddenly, "Switch off the hazard lights! Switch off the hazard lights!" the male on the other end of the line begins to roar. In a flash, the dispatcher relays the information to nearby police units, quickly telling them to look for a stationary vehicle with hazard lights flashing. "Help us! Please help us!" the girl begins to scream, seeming like she can actually see police officers from wherever she is. A wave of relief washes over to the dispatcher as the next thing he hears over his radio contact with the Detroit Police Department. "Unlock the car! Police officers! Unlock the car!" they scream. "Show me your hands! Don't move! Do not move!" "Thank God you're here." "He was violating us," the girls are heard to sob. There is a brief scuffle as the kidnapper is put into cuffs, while the dispatcher listens the entire time. One of the girls had managed to call 911 while keeping her hidden cell phone in a pocket to hide the fact that she had attempted to contact emergency services. This has helped guide the police onto their location, possibly saving their lives. "All right, I think we got this under control," an officer is then heard to say. "Thanks, dispatch." Then both the radios and the cell phone go quiet. East Point and Detroit police took the suspect, a man by the name of Derek Smith, immediately into custody. Smith had apparently only just gotten out of prison just a few months before, after having served a prison sentence for assault. The two women the police found kidnapped in his vehicle were actually sisters who said that they had met Derek Smith that very same evening at a local nightclub, and it was down to the quick thinking of one of them, as well as the actions of the 911 dispatcher that received their call, that their torturous kidnap and assault was cut short, before Smith had time to do any permanent injury. It's an ironic twist that today's seemingly intrusive surveillance technology is not always used for society's detriment, and the same technology that can be used to infringe on human rights can actually be used to preserve human life as well. On the night of July 9, 2010, a call came into the Orange County Sheriff's Office, originating from a recycling company in the city of Orlando, Florida. As calm as could be, the operator picked up the call and asked what the emergency was. "I'm at Stone, Orlando, which is on 7th Avenue, the caller said, sounding surprisingly calm considering the words that came next. "I just got my leg amputated by a baler. I need 911 emergency assistance immediately, please." A baler is a piece of machinery used to compress and cut raked products, such as hay or cotton, into compact bales that are easy to handle, transport, and store. Industrial balers are also used in material recycling facilities, primarily for baling metal, plastic, or paper for transport. The caller had been working the night shift when the baling machine jammed. He unclogged it, but before he could get out, it started up again, and the compacting ram began moving towards him. He managed to pull himself out of the way of the moving ram by lifting his body up, but unfortunately his right boot was not up far enough, and the ram caught his boot. "You just had your leg amputated by a bailiff?" the operator asked, a hint of tiresome disbelief creeping into her voice at having misheard the word. "Ma'am, this is not a joke," came the reply. I'm gonna die. I'm gonna bleed to death. I'm afraid. Please help me." Okay. The operator regains her seriousness. "Tell me where you are again." The caller repeats that his location is Stone, a recycling company location on the Orange Blossom Trail. "Hold for the paramedics," she says, maintaining an incredible amount of professionalism considering what she's hearing from the young man on the other end of the line. "Ma'am, I'm gonna die if you don't. Please help me, he says. The young man is trying to remain calm, but the gravity of his situation is sinking in, and his voice is beginning to quake with fear. As the local fire department is patched into the call, there follows a few agonizing moments as the young man with the amputated leg is forced to actually spell the name of the company he is employed by. It becomes increasingly clear that the emergency services cannot locate the address, and time is running out. "Are you there by yourself, sir?" a man from the fire department asks, obviously about to prompt him to seek preliminary medical treatment in the hopes it might stem the bleeding. "No, sir, I'm not alone," replies the young man. "But no one's hearing me, and I'm really losing blood, sir. I'm going to die. And what business are you at?" "Smurfit Stone." "Moffat Stone?" the fire department dispatcher asks, sounding utterly confused. "Smurfit," the young man snaps back. His life is on the line, and this is the third or fourth time he's had to spell it out. "Smurfit. Smurfit." "Do you have anything to control the bleeding with?" the dispatcher then asks. I have nothing, sir." The young man's voice begins to shrink. Each second that passes is one that brings him closer to bleeding out. Hopelessness begins to saturate his tone. "Okay, are you or your leg stuck in the machine?" The operator knows that if this is the case, the constriction might be doing a good enough job of stemming the bleeding, but the reply is not good. "I'm out, but my leg is down there." "Was the cut above the knee or below the knee?" The dispatcher then asks, perhaps the second most crucial question that is asked that night. Below the knee, it was. It was under my ankle," the young man replies. In light of the grim situation, this is excellent news. If the severance was around the young man's thigh, it would have severed a femoral artery, and it was likely he would have bled to death in mere minutes. "And how old are you, sir?" I'm 20. Barely out of his teenage years, the young man has suffered life-threatening injuries, but has the presence of mind to keep calm enough to follow the instructions that might have just saved his life. "Do you have anything at all you could use to control the bleeding, even if you have to take your shirt off?" the operator asks. I can wrap my jeans up around it," the young man replies. "Good. You don't have to tie it up as tight as a tourniquet, but you need to apply pressure. You can do that, right?" "Right," comes the reply. "But sir, I think I'm going to pass out. If I do, can you please do me a favor? Can you call my mother? I'm going to die, so please tell her I love her." "We're coming, sir," the dispatcher responds, clearly affected by the man's dying plea. You're not going to die. Everything's going to be all right, okay? We're coming as fast." The dispatcher's voice breaks off, trembling as he says his next words. "We're coming as fast as we can, but I want you to control the bleeding with your hand, okay?" "Yes, sir. I'm controlling it," the young man replies, sounding weaker and weaker by the second. "But how much blood do I have to lose before I die?" The question is so sincere it's heart-wrenching. I don't know. Just hold that shirt. Just continue to hold that shirt on there." I'm gonna die," the young man states. He sounds resigned to his fate now. "No, you're not, sir," the operator asserts. "My mother is gonna..." The caller breaks off into a laugh, like the operator's resolve has renewed his bravery. "I'm not gonna die from this, but my mother's gonna kill me. Have you called her?" "We will, sir. We will call her." "Can I just ask if any other calls have come in from this location?" the young man asks. "I'm curious if any of my coworkers have called." "I don't see any other calls." "That's great," the young man replies with a sarcastic laugh. "I love these guys." There's a brief silence before the young man speaks again. "Sir, what's your name?" he asks. "Yeah, I'm here. My name is Jeff." "I love you, dude," the young man says. A few sniffles can be heard down the line as the young man begins to tear up. "We're coming as fast as we can, sir. Just keep talking to me and use your other hand to control that bleeding, okay?" "Jeff, can you please pray for me real quick?" Can you pray with me? The young man asks. Go ahead, sir. Dear Lord Jesus, the young man begins. I bring you all my sins I've ever committed, and I love you so much. Please don't let me die. But if I do, please let me go to the good place. I know I've done so much in my life, Lord. I've done so much, but please, just let me be okay. And if I'm not, please let me live in heaven with you. Please be with my mother too. Keep her strong, because I know she's not going to be happy. God, please let me get through this. There was another brief silence, more sniffles coming from the other end. Sir, I can't hear any ambulance or anything. Desperation creeps into the young man's voice. They're coming as fast as they can, sir. Are you sure you have the right address? You're down off of, you're off of Land Street Road, right? Yes, sir. The man sounds renewed again. Hope returns to his voice. Are they gonna have painkillers for me? If you need it, they're gonna give you whatever you need, okay? I think I'm gonna throw up. Am I gonna die? The fear in the young man's voice is palpable. You're not gonna die, sir. But you're feeling pretty faint, right? But that's why I want to keep you talking to me. How's the bleeding right now? It's pretty much stopped. But I don't know how much longer I can hold my hand there. That's okay. They're just around the corner from now. Just keep your hand on there, even though the bleeding has stopped. Sir, I forgot about my dad, the young man says. My stepdad. He adopted me. Please tell him I love him too. What's your name, sir? Jeff the dispatcher asks, keeping the young man's mind elsewhere. John, the young man replies. John Maynard. Maynard. The next moment, the original sheriff's dispatcher interrupts to inform Jeff that the emergency responders are at the recycling plant, but cannot find the young John Maynard anywhere. John reconfirms his exact position, then says something truly chilling. It's pretty gruesome in here, I'm not going to lie to you. I think I'm going to pass out. No, you're not. You're going to be fine, John. Just keep talking to me. Jeff replies defiantly. His heart and soul are in this now. He's gotten to know this young man in the brief minutes of being on the line with him. The love he has for his mother, for the stepfather who took him in and cared for him as if he were his own. How brave he's been throughout this whole traumatic experience. They're coming for you, John. They're coming. You're my hero, John replies. What was that, sir? I said, you're my hero. John is sounding increasingly faint, as if he really is on the verge of passing out. You're my hero, dude. Suddenly a panicked voice can be heard in the background of John's call. Oh God. The words are garbled, but somehow perfectly understandable. Do you hear somebody, John? I hear somebody in the background, Jeff says. That's my coworker, Richie. He's my best friend. John replies. Richie is clearly stunned and horrified by what he's found, but he keeps it together just long enough to rush to the oncoming emergency workers, guiding them into John's location to render him aid. I love everybody, John says, sounding weak, but full of hope. It becomes clear throughout the next minute or so that 2 responding police officers have arrived, the closest unit in the area. John begins to talk to them as they provide him with some basic first aid and hands up the phone soon after, but his final words to the dispatch officer are some which would melt the hearts of even the hardest. I'm going to write you a letter and send you flowers, he says. Then the line goes dead. He survived the incident and kept his word that he could write to Jeff the dispatcher, who helped save his life that night. It was the longest 16 minutes of my life, John Maynard wrote after his recovery. Later in the hospital, he had his leg amputated 6 inches below his knee and has since learned to walk with a prosthetic. Very pleased with the job you did, keeping me alert and responsive, he wrote in his letter to him. John has stayed in contact with all of those that helped him that night, including the responding police officers who found him. But he has refused to let the injury ruin his life, and has even gotten married since July 9th, 2010, the night he sustained his life-changing injury. John now runs, rock climbs, and even set up a YouTube channel under the name Crew 9T. It was initially described as a coping mechanism to help him deal with such a traumatic event, but has since described it as growing into something much bigger. The channel was more from a small personal project into a way of providing help and guidance to recent amputees, along with older amputees who still need help in their daily lives. The channel also functions as a teaching tool for anybody who is interested in learning more about amputees and their way of life. My accident has changed my outlook toward the world, and I feel that my goals and even my way of thinking have changed too, Maynard has stated in his videos. My goal now is to help encourage other amputees to continue on with their lives. Just because you lose a limb does not mean that you should lose your life. I want to show any amputee struggling with their situation that life does go on, and it can be better than you could have ever imagined. So now that you've heard the harrowing story of the night he lost his leg, go visit John's YouTube channel and check out some of his videos. Wish him well, tell him how brave he was, and thank him for showing the fortitude to not only survive that night, but coming out the other side as a stronger person who has had the presence of mind to build a community of survivors who might borrow just a little bit of his wonderful, endearing spirit. It is 4 a.m. on December 18, 2012. A 911 dispatcher in Colorado receives a call from Longmount, a community about 30 miles northwest of Denver. 911, what's the address of the emergency? The dispatcher asks in her usual calm and professional manner. 11464. The caller breaks off and goes silent. She is panting, trying to keep her voice as low as possible. I need you to say the address, the dispatcher says, sounding half concerned, half frustrated. I can't understand you. 11464 Hot Springs, the caller replies. Her words are followed by a strange series of clicks coming from her end of the line. Okay, the dispatcher asks. I'm going to need you to repeat the address just once more to make sure I have it right. But the caller doesn't repeat the address. Instead, she begins to cry out in a voice that is flooded with terrified pleading. No, 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 please, no. A loud crack can then be heard from the caller's end of the line, followed by a deep thud, then another loud crack. The dispatcher keeps as calm as possible, asking if the woman on the other end is still there, but she does not speak again. Instead, the next voice to be heard on the line is that of a man. Hello? Okay, this is 911, the dispatcher says. What is going on? I just shot everybody, the man replies in a matter-of-fact tone. You just shot everybody? The dispatcher sounds shocked and outraged. Yeah, the man confirms. Okay, what is your name? The dispatcher asks, a hint of fury in her voice. Pablo Sanchez, comes the reply. How many people did you shoot? 3. Pablo says, sounding almost impressed with his own ability to murder. You shot... Who people? Who did you shoot? The dispatcher is so taken aback she can barely get her words out. My ex-girlfriend, Pablo replies. She was cheating on me, with Roy. He talks as if everyone knows who Roy is. Okay. The dispatcher begins a flurry of typing, trying to dispatch the police officers to the address as quickly as physically possible. And, so... I'm going to shoot myself right now, Pablo says again with a disturbingly matter-of-fact tone. Pablo, I need you to stay on the phone with me, okay? Just wait until we get there, the dispatcher pleads. There was a brief silence, more panic typing. Pablo? The dispatcher asks. Yeah? Just stay with me, okay? Do not shoot yourself. Okay. Pablo replies, sounding as if though he might just be coming back from the brink. Tell me exactly what happened. About 6 months ago, I caught my girlfriend cheating on me. Pablo begins to explain. And I told Roy to stop talking to her, but he wouldn't. He pressed charges on me, kidnapping. I'm out on bond right now. Who else was there? The dispatcher asks. Who else was there with you tonight? There are other 2 people. Do you know who they were? Oh, her sister and her sister's husband, Pablo replies, the realization hitting him as he begins to panic. Are you there by yourself? Asks the dispatcher, typing furiously as Pablo confirms he's there alone. But only now is Pablo alone, and only because of his own violent actions. Okay, what room are you in? She then asks, but he doesn't reply. Pablo. Then the same kind of dull crack that was heard before is heard once more. The local sheriff's department later confirmed that Daniel Pablo Sanchez shot and killed his ex-girlfriend, Beatriz Cintora Silva, who had been staying with her sister and brother-in-law at the home after she left Sanchez on Thanksgiving following a physical altercation. At about 4 a.m., Sanchez shot out the back door of the modular home, located in a neighborhood off of Colorado Highway 119, just east of Longmont. He had been released the day before at around 10 p.m. from the Boulder County Jail, where he was booked on domestic violence-related charges stemming from an incident with Beatriz. She told police he physically assaulted her and kidnapped her after she met with him to discuss repayment of money she had loaned him. Beatriz Cintora Silva had been warned not to remain with her sister and brother-in-law since Sanchez knew where she was and that she turned down an offer of additional police protection. He said she was notified when he was released on bond. 6 hours later, all 4 people were dead. My name is Teresa, and I work as a 911 dispatcher here in Michigan for 8 long years. The job has its perks. The pay was pretty good, because $22 an hour was nothing to sniff at for someone like me, someone with absolutely nothing in the way of college prospects. It turned out that all I needed to apply was my high school diploma, a willingness to knuckle down and soak up the on-the-job training, and the will to listen to some of the most haunting, terrifying things that anyone could possibly hear. The first 2 came relatively easy, the last one not so much. But after a while, the mix of mundane, my neighbor's dog barked at me kind of nonsense, and the adrenaline-soaked, lives on the line kind of calls made for a weird dichotomy. I mean, you never really wanted to hear that someone's home was being broken into by a man with a fire axe, intent on murdering them. True story, by the way. Or that someone's kid had been electrocuted by sticking a fork into an electrical socket. Also a true story. But whenever someone called up in a panic and you geared up to save lives only to find out that they had seen some teenager graffiti an alley somewhere, you just wanted to find that person and slap them before making them eat their cell phone. Just over 50% of all the calls were something we could actually act upon. A medical emergency, a fire, some actual violent crime or something. The other 40% were just non-events. People of diminished capacity, or Karens as I suppose you call them these days, who'd never really contemplated just exactly what was their business and what wasn't. But the other 10%, maybe even less than that, were things that would keep me up at night if I didn't self-medicate with my preferred cocktail of double Vs, 3 double vodkas, and 2 Valium. I honestly don't want to talk about most of those calls, the ones that made horror movies more like comedies, but there is one I keep in reserve for whenever I get that "what was your worst call ever" question from the mentally deficient or morbidly curious, and this is how it went. So I get a call popping up on my screen one cloudy Saturday afternoon. I answer it with the same old 911, what is your emergency line that sometimes I thought would end up getting chiseled into my gravestone. Only I don't hear a thing on the other end of the line. Now, we get way more accidental calls than you might expect. Even before they brought out smartphones, they had those newfangled emergency tap features. We used to get a fair amount of accidental 911 calls just from what is sophisticatedly known as butt dialing. These are irritating at the best of times, not just because they take up much-needed line space, but because sometimes people call 911 when they're in an emergency in which they're unable to speak. So naturally, when we get these kinds of calls, we either have to call back to ensure an emergency isn't in process, or take the time to trace the call before sending out an officer or two to confirm that everything is fine. But anyway, there I am, parroting, "Hello," down the line, before letting out a sigh when I start to suspect that this is yet another butt-dialing event that is going to take up valuable time. Yet just as I'm about to hang up to initiate a call back and a possible trace, I hear this tiny little voice on the other end of the line. I couldn't quite tell if it was a little boy or a little girl, but they were young, really young, no older than about 4 or 5 years old. "Hello?" they asked, in the cutest little voice I'd ever heard in all my time manning that desk. But they were scared, really scared, not quite crying, but that kind of confused fear that you only hear in kids that small. "Hello, sweetie, I'm here," I said, instantly changing my matter-of-fact tone into one that was much more nurturing and friendly. "Is everything okay?" "I need a 911, they replied. "Well, you did a great calling 911, sweetie. Good job. Are Mommy or Daddy there? Can you give them the phone for me?" "Daddy isn't here, but Mommy is." "Okay, sweetie, can you be a really good kid and put Mommy on the phone for me?" I asked, remaining as patient and as calm as I possibly could. There was every chance this was just some kid being silly, but something in their little voice made me think otherwise, and I was right. What they said next is something I heard over and over again for months after. "Mommy's eye fell out." I paused, hoping I misheard her, praying I'd misheard her. "What was that, sweetie? Mommy's eye fell out?" "Yeah, it's fell out and she won't get up," she repeated. I slowly pieced together a mental image of what she was seeing in my head. When it came together, I felt sick, like physically nauseous. I was pretty sure I was listening to a child being traumatized in real time. Yes, I've had worse calls, more violent calls where I've literally listened to a person lose their life on the line. But for some reason, hearing that kid describe what I imagined to be her dead or dying mother, hearing that kid's innocence being burned away by whatever horrendous image she was seeing, that was all so much worse. "Sweetie, do you know where it is you live at?" I remember asking the kid. There was a slim chance they knew a street name or a neighborhood, but I commenced a call trace all the same. We needed the cops out there double time to get her away from whatever she was seeing. "Yeah," she replied. "I live at home." With being a home phone, the trace took seconds, and I kept them on the line while I directed the nearest active unit of cops onto her location. "Sweetie, do you know what happened to Mommy?" I asked her. My number one concern at the time was that someone had actually attacked their mom, and whoever that was might still be in or around the home with the potential to hurt the kid. "Mommy and Daddy were shouting," they replied. Okay. I need you to not look at Mommy anymore. Can you do that for me, sweetie?" "Yeah." "I want you to turn away from Mommy and look at something else. Do you have a stuffy or anything else that you'd like to look at?" "I have Olaf," she replied, which I later learned was the snowman character from the movie Frozen. "Okay, I want you to stay on the phone with me and look at Olaf." I tried everything I could to keep them from looking at her mom, asking them to describe Olaf to me in as much detail as possible, and asking question after question just to keep their little mind occupied. I kept talking until I heard the cops were on the scene. They had no problem getting into the apartment in question because apparently the door was left wide open. The kid, who turned out to be a little girl of just 4 years old, was taken to child services, where she is now on the verge of entering the adoption system. Hopefully she'll find a family that will care for her and give her the happy, stable life that she so richly deserves. It turned out that the girl's father was never around, and that the man that had beaten her mother to death with a claw hammer was actually the woman's current boyfriend, who had a history of drug use and violence against women. After he had attacked and murdered her, apparently over a seemingly minor issue, he tried to flee out of the state in a misguided attempt to evade justice. But thanks to a busted taillight, he was pulled over in a routine traffic stop and acted too skittish that the traffic cop ended up detaining him while he searched his car. Apparently the cop found the bloody claw hammer in the trunk of his car and arrested him there and then. Like I said before, this isn't the worst call I'd ever received during my time in the job. There are some that still give me nightmares years later, but this is the worst one that I'm still comfortable talking about, maybe just because it has a semblance of a happy ending, given that the little girl in question ended up getting adopted by a loving couple who just so happened to be looking to give a home to a kid, just like her. Being a 911 dispatcher can be a very strange and stressful job indeed. A variety of calls come in from all kinds of people from all walks of life, and not all of them are emergencies at all. Sometimes we get some really weird calls, like people calling 911 because a cop has pulled them over, calling because they saw two girls kiss on TV, or people calling up trying to get a sitting president impeached. Sounds unbelievable, right? But trust me when I say that those three examples aren't just pulled out of my butt. They're calls I've personally received while on the job. But perhaps the strangest call I've ever received was in my 14th year of the job when I was working down in Oregon. I used to live up in my home state of Washington, but when my wife had to move down there for her job, I put in a transfer and got moved down to Portland pretty quickly. And this call happened when I was working down there. So I get a call on screen and answer it with the usual Oregon 911. The reply is something I thought I'd never hear in all my years working those desks. "I'd like to order a pizza at 325 Rodeo Drive," the person on the other end of the line says. Not this person's real address, and you'll see why in a minute. I was astounded. Either this person was extremely stupid, extremely drunk, or possibly a dangerous combination of both. Obviously, I'm pretty annoyed, but I try to keep cool, calmly asking the person if they just seriously called 911 to order a pizza. My jaw drops when the person actually confirms that, yes, they are legitimately calling the emergency services to order a pizza, going on to tell me which apartment they want it delivered to. My coworkers obviously overheard what I just said, and a few were looking around at me, some shaking their head and laughing, a few others with stormy looks of outrage etched into their tired faces. "This is the wrong number to call for a pizza," I said, loud enough to send a handful of my colleagues into fits of giggles. Things get pretty tense in the dispatch offices, and honestly, laughter is something we use as a kind of survival tool. Otherwise, I'm not sure many of us would make it through the day, let alone an entire working week. No, you're not understanding. I need pizza," she said. It was only then that I picked up on something in her voice. She definitely wasn't drunk or high, and she sounded incredibly lucid. The hairs on the back of my neck began to stand up as I realized that the thing that I was detecting in her voice that day was not ignorance or selfishness. It was raw fear. And then I understood. You see, we get a lot of domestic violence calls, and some come in some pretty unconventional formats. I wasn't entirely sure this was one of them, so in a low voice, I got to confirming. "Is the other guy still there?" I asked. "Yep, I need a large pizza," she said. And I can't quite put into words here, but the way she said it was just full of relief, like she was so glad that I'd managed to pick up on what she was really saying. I then asked her if she needed any medical assistance sent out to her apartment building. I couldn't hear any pain or discomfort in her voice. She was keeping amazingly calm considering she was in such a messy situation, but better to be safe than sorry, right? Her response was something I'll never forget, almost as comical as it was disturbing. "No, with pepperoni." This woman could have been a spy or something in another life, or an actress. Her tone was just flawless. I asked her to hold the line for a moment, to pretend the guy at the pizza place's pen had ran out or something, then immediately got in touch with local police officers. I told them it was a domestic violence call, but made it clear that they were to turn their sirens off before they got there, filled them in on the whole pizza order cover story thing, and obviously stated that the woman in question would be at risk if her abusive spouse or boyfriend caught on to the fact that she called 911. A lot of people seem to think being a dispatcher is just being a headset-wearing desk jockey with a mouse and keyboard, but it's so much more than that. A lot of intuition is involved, as well as the ability to actually listen to someone, not just what they're saying, but exactly how they're saying it. I don't mean to talk out of turn here, but some other dispatchers I know would just not have picked up on what was going on with that call. Not because I'm so smart, but because they've straight up told me that they wouldn't have. That could have been anyone else in my office, and that woman could be up the creek with no paddle, so to speak. I asked around a bunch too, and not a single other dispatcher had ever had a call like that, where the whole pizza delivery thing was used as a cover for domestic violence. But without a doubt, using that kind of code to alert the authorities was 100% the right thing for her to do. And if you're reading this, and you're wondering, or if you're ever in a similar kind of situation, a kidnapping, a domestic violence situation, anything like that, just know that as long as you convey the seriousness of the situation, there's every chance that we will realize what the issue is. We know the general public isn't stupid, crazy, maybe, but not stupid. Even if it takes getting hung up at first and calling back, use the tone of your voice, and someone will eventually get your gist and be able to send help. As a result of the woman's call, a man by the name of Simon Lopez was arrested and taken to Lucas County Jail on domestic violence charges, as well as a few outstanding warrants. It turned out not to be the actual victim of domestic battery that made the call. It was the woman's daughter. So it was little wonder she was able to keep so calm. But man, what a blessing to her mother that the young woman was, and I sincerely hope my kid grows up to be that smart. Apparently she used the kind of code she did in the hopes that the guy hitting her mom wouldn't run away before the cops actually got there to arrest him, and by God did it work. I should also add that it's possible to text 911 to summon police or medical assistance, just in case you can't actually talk during an emergency. Hey friends, thanks for listening. Click that notification bell to be alerted of all future narrations. If you got a story, be sure to submit them to my subreddit, r/Let'sReadOfficial, and give and receive feedback from the community, and maybe even hear your story featured on the next video. And join my Discord to interact with me and other listeners directly. And if you want to support me even more, grab early access to all future narrations for just $1 a month on Patreon, and maybe even pick up some Let's Read merch on Spreadshirt. And check out the Let's Read podcast, where you can hear all these stories in long compilation form and save huge on data, located anywhere you listen to podcasts. Links in the bio. Thanks so much, friends. And remember, always sop it up with a biscuit.